guys, I am looking like a hot mess, and what better time to test a new concealer. Today I am going to be doing a wear test for the new Fenty Beauty Pro Filt'r Concealer. Now let's check the claims. This says it's instant photo soft coverage for all, long wear, light as air, and crease proof. So unlike a lot of other concealers like Tarte Shape Tape or Huda Beauty Overachiever, this isn't very specifically targeted at the under eye area. Just looking at the huge range of colors in the collection, you know immediately it's meant to be a skin matching general multi-purpose concealer for use around the entire face. It's not just meant for the under eye area. So I'm going to be testing it in multiple areas today, and I've got a few things to conceal, so I will wear it throughout the day and let you know how things go. Also, just to keep things a little bit more interesting and have a point of comparison, I'm going to be wearing Fenty Beauty Pro Filt'r only on this side. On this side, I am going to be wearing my Tarte Shape Tape. Now, the reason I am comparing it to Tarte Shape Tape is because over 80% of you voted to have me try this against Tarte Shape Tape. Now, for those of you who are not from Singapore, you may not know that Tarte has only very recently launched Shape Tape in Singapore at Sephora. A lot of people are trying to decide between these two concealers that just launched, so it makes sense for me to do a side-by-side comparison and just see how each of these lasts. Now I'm going to be using a foundation first, and my foundation of choice for the day will be Maybelline Fit Me Matte and Poreless. I am not going to be using the Fenty Beauty Pro Filt'r foundation, even though I do own that in the same shade, because I don't want to give this too much of an advantage, and that one is very matte and very high coverage, so that sort of affects the texture and the finish of concealers that you put on top of it as well. Whereas this one, for me, on my skin at least, is quite skin neutral. It doesn't make me more dry, and it doesn't make me more dewy, so it's very much less likely to affect the lasting power and the finish of any concealer that I put on top of it. Also, this isn't very high coverage, so I'll be doing very light layer and applying a minimal amount under my eyes, so you should be able to see the level of coverage that the concealer has. Not going to be applying too much, and I'm going to bounce it in with my new Electric Violet Swirl Beauty Blender. This is so cute. So as you can see, the foundation has evened out my skin tone slightly. It's neutralized some discolorations, but it still left plenty of dark circles and also a little bit of concealing needed, so we should be able to check how well the Fenty covers. Okay, I got the shade 180, which is also my shade in the foundation. So it's not a particularly brightening shade, it is more like perfect skin match for me. And for my case, I want to use it both for covering marks or discolorations, acne, as well as occasionally dark circles. So I want a slightly more skin matching shade. I'm not using it just to highlight under the eyes. Oh, that looks like it's going to be a lot. A few little blemishes here and there, veins. Now with the areas where I want a little bit more coverage, I'm not using the sponge, I'm just using a finger to lightly tap, because the sponge will tend to remove a little bit more coverage, but it spreads the product out a little bit more as well. Now the concealer is a touch lighter than the foundation. And both of these will set slightly deeper than they look while wet. So it's not going to look this bright in a minute's time. But the foundation is just half a tone deeper than the concealer itself, which is quite alright in this case. Because most of the time we go for concealers that are just half a tone lighter. But just be aware that they're not 100% matches. So far, it looks really, really good. And it was very, very quick to blend, really fast. It almost dries immediately into this matte powdery finish, and it's very lightweight but very matte. I can't even see that little spot that I had there. So far, it does grab a little around fine lines under my eyes. That's inevitable. I mean, most concealers will. But because it sets so fast, it can be a little bit hard to blend them into the dips and crevices. So that's one thing you need to be aware of when using this. Just pay a little attention if you're applying it around the eye area or places where you have some fine lines or texture, just to make sure that it doesn't gather around pores or around the lines. But so far so good. It's looking really good. Okay, I'm gonna do my Shape Tape on the other side, and because I have this in two shades that are not exactly my match, my Fenty 180 is in between these two shades. I'm gonna have to mix these two. So one is Light Sand 22S and the other is Light Medium Sand 27S, and they're quite far apart, so the joys of being between two shades. Using the clean side of the sponge. Now, in front of the lights, I feel like the Tarte is a little bit more corrective. It seems to have neutralized, the discolorations and dark purplish tones under my eyes a little bit better than the Fenty. The Fenty also has slightly less coverage than the Tarte. With the Tarte, I have a little bit more time to play with the product and blend it out. But at the same time, of course, if you're on the go and you want something really, really quick, then this would set and be ready to go much faster than the Tarte Shape Tape. I am going to add a little bit more of the Fenty concealer just to see if it builds up a little bit more. I did test this on IG yesterday and it did not layer very well, so I'm slightly worried. We'll see how it goes. It's like the formula has really strong film forming agents. So once it's set to this powder finish, when you try to add more liquid or cream on top of it, it sort of breaks down and disturbs the layer beneath. And then when everything resets, it resets really fast and then you get a slightly cakier finish, which I'm hoping to avoid by using a beauty blender. Okay, it seems to have built up pretty well. Definitely better with a blending sponge than trying to build with finger. I'm just gonna set everything with a little bit of loose powder, nothing that has pigmentation in it. I'm just gonna use my Makeup Forever Super Matte. Okay, immediate impressions. Let me try and zoom you in a little bit closer. Now, I'm not sure how visible it is, but the side where I'm wearing the Fenty Pro Filt'r concealer has a little bit more fine lines showing. It's like the matte textures just making the fine lines a little bit more obvious compared to the Tarte side. There is just one single crease here, and that's a very natural one. It's unavoidable. Now, if I was just wearing the Fenty and not the Tarte, I would be okay with this amount of fine lines showing. Right now, as someone with dry skin around the eyes, I definitely prefer the Fenty Pro Filt'r concealer as a face concealer for spots and blemishes and evening out skin tone, far more than I like it as an under-eye concealer. That's not to say that it's bad as an under-eye concealer, it's just not looking as good as the Tarte Shape Tape is. But of course, we'll have to wear it through the day, and then I'm going to check in and let you see how it wears, because if it doesn't stay looking good, then some concealers you apply around raised bumps and then it looks a little bit cakey, or it doesn't sit evenly over the whole spot. But this one is sitting very nicely over my little blemish here and here. And the fact that it sets to a powder finish as well helps it to instantly smooth over raised bumps. So there's an optical illusion when you have something that's very matte on top of it. When you look at it front on, or basically in different lights, it almost looks like it's flatter. It's not quite as raised or as large as it actually is. As a face concealer, as a blemish concealer, so far this is looking really, really good. Some products will grab on setting powder as you apply it, and then it will cake up, or it will sort of bunch up around your pores and fine lines, and this one hasn't. It's set very, very nicely. So I'm gonna go off and do my makeup and hair, and I will be back in 3, 2, I'm wearing Shu Uemuru's new red 163. This is the one with the special packaging. Now this is supposed to be a universal red for Asian women. Because they balanced out the optimal proportion of cool and warm undertones for Asian skins. Don't be restricted by that. It is just a very beautiful bright red. So if you are interested in it, just check it out, try it out. Just check it out, try it out. I did also use a Q-tip to clean up the edges, and I used it to draw a little RD163 along the tops of my lash line, just in the outer corners. A little hint of something different. So I am going to go about my day now, and I will check in periodically just to show you how things are holding up under my eyes and on top of my blemishes. Hello folks, it is the end of the day. It is now 6:19. I've been wearing this since about 10 a.m. in the morning, so it's about 8 hours now. Now I've been out and about, but I haven't been sweating too much, and it's a warm day but not especially hot as far as weather goes in Singapore. So both concealers are holding up very well right now. In fact, I'm slightly disappointed because there isn't even any additional creasing since I applied it earlier in the morning. Well, the thing about the Fenty formula is that it just goes on and then it sets and it locks down. So I consider this very, very good if you have slightly oily skin. It would just emphasize some lines if you're dry, like I mentioned earlier in the day. The Tarte is looking pretty good for me now as well. Maybe slightly more fading around this area of my eye, which tends to happen after a long day for me. And this is a slightly more hydrating formula than the Fenty Pro Filt'r, so it's kind of expected that it would wear away a little bit more with regular movement, touching and all that. Now, my usual problem with slightly drier under-eye concealers is when I laugh or when I talk and when I move and I emote through the day, you start to get little creases, and these are dry creases. It's almost like makeup is cracking, and then I can't touch it up easily. I can't just do this and smooth it over like you would with creamier formulas. I didn't experience that with this one, but then I really didn't do too much today. So I don't know, people, I'm gonna have to say this is a bit of a tie. Initially, when I first applied them, I did like the Tarte a lot more because it seemed to correct a little bit more. There was a lot more instant coverage. It dried slower, so if you're in a rush, that's not a good thing, but for me, drying slower means that I get more time to sort of pat it in and make sure it's not emphasizing lines, because for formulas that set really quick, like the Fenty Pro Filt'r, sometimes you smooth it on before you can ease it into little crevices and cracks and dips. It's already set. So it looks like you have those lines and it dries around your fine lines, so it makes them more obvious. I will say that the Fenty still feels very matte. It feels very intact. Like, I know if I'm going to rub my eyes, it's not going to come off. Whereas for the Tarte, around the outer corners here, I know if I were to rub a little, it would just come off already, because this formula seems to be a little bit more prone to breaking down and then transferring off during the day than this one. So it really depends on your preference and what you need from a concealer. I would say if you have combination to oily skin, definitely go with the Fenty Pro Filt'r. You may need to do a little bit more work building up coverage compared to the Tarte Shape Tape, but if you need it to last for 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours or more, this one would hold up a lot better than the Tarte Shape Tape. Now I have that little raised bump here where I applied the concealer. It's still mostly there. It's been about 8 hours and it's still mostly there, so definitely A+ for spot coverage. When I got a bit shiny, obviously you could see a little bit more of that bump, but the moment I press and blot any shine away, it's back to the very matte coverage. And I could possibly retouch a little. It's faded a tiny bit because that's just what happens. On the areas where I had some dark marks, it's sitting perfectly well. Around my nostrils, where I applied a little bit of concealer, just a very light layer, to cover up any redness from veins around my nostrils, it's not creased very much. Usually by this time, it's a mess, but now the only place where it's starting to look a little bit patchy is here, under my eyes, where I built up 2 layers. So the areas where I did a very light layer performed beautifully, and the only area where I applied a second coat to try and build up a little bit more coverage, it started to cake up a little bit when I got oily and then blotted my face. This formula is extremely light because it goes from this soft cream into a powder finish very quickly, so you almost feel no weight. It's not going to feel very thick and cakey. And the best proof of that is the fact that I am not getting any creasing around my nose. You know, usually this creases within 1 or 2 hours, regardless of which foundation or concealer I'm using. And this is 8 hours in and I don't have any creasing here, which is pretty much unheard of for me, because my nose area is the oiliest part of my face. I've just not met a concealer yet that stayed on, still has coverage after 8 hours, but has not cracked or creased along the folds of my nostril. So that's the conclusion for today's wear test of the Fenty Pro Filt'r Concealer. I do give this a thumbs up for lasting power and a very nice velvety matte finish. If you have dry skin, this may not be great in areas where you have a lot of fine lines, but if you're using it as a spot concealer, this works for pretty much every skin type. It set beautifully on my dry areas, and it also set pretty well on my oilier areas. If you've tried this, if you like it or dislike it, let me know why, let me know what kind of skin type you have, because that would be very interesting for me to find out. If you found this helpful, please give me a thumbs up as well, that will really help me out, and I will see you in the next video.